As the world crumbled around them, a disparate group of survivors converged on the remote military installation, the last known stronghold against the encroaching darkness. Among them was Sergeant Amelia Donovan, a battle-hardened soldier whose steely resolve and tactical expertise had earned her the respect of her comrades. Amelia had spent the last few weeks navigating the treacherous, lawless wasteland, witnessing firsthand the horrors that had befallen humanity. The sight of once thriving cities reduced to rubble, the screams of the dying echoing in the distance, had steeled her determination to reach the fortress and make her final stand. As she approached the towering gates, Amelia couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over her. This place, with its formidable walls and advanced defenses, represented the last, best hope for the survival of the human race. She knew that the challenges that lay ahead would be immense, but her training had prepared her for such daunting tasks. Beside her, a brilliant young engineer named Liam Archer studied the fortress with a critical eye. "This place has seen better days," he murmured, "but with the right team, we can make it impregnable." Amelia nodded, her gaze sweeping across the assembled group. There were doctors, technicians, and even a few former military personnel, all drawn to this last bastion of civilization. "We'll need every one of you to pull your weight," she said, her voice firm. "The enemy is closing in, and we can't afford any mistakes." As the group was ushered inside, they were greeted by the fortress commander, a seasoned veteran named Colonel Marcos Alvarez. His weathered face betrayed a lifetime of hard-won battles, but his eyes burned with a fierce determination. "Welcome to the last fortress," he announced, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "You've all been brought here for a reason, to help us defend the last stronghold of humanity against the darkness that threatens to consume us all." Amelia listened intently as the colonel outlined the grim realities they faced. The enemy, an enigmatic and relentless force, had systematically eliminated other pockets of resistance across the globe. This fortress, with its formidable defenses and ample resources, was the only remaining obstacle in their path. "We've been preparing for this moment," Alvarez said, his gaze sweeping across the assembled survivors. "But we can't do it alone. We need your skills, your courage, and your unwavering commitment to the cause. Together, we'll stand against the tide and ensure that humanity prevails." As the colonel finished speaking, a hush fell over the group. The weight of their task was palpable, the magnitude of their mission utterly daunting. Yet, Amelia could see the determination in their eyes, the glimmer of hope that had drawn them to this place. "We're with you, Colonel," she said, stepping forward. "Whatever it takes, we'll defend this fortress to the last." Alvarez nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Then let's get to work. Time is not on our side, and the enemy is closing in. We need to fortify our defenses, stockpile supplies, and prepare for the battle to come." With renewed purpose, the survivors dispersed, each one drawn to the tasks that lay ahead. Amelia watched as Liam and a team of engineers began surveying the fortress, already formulating plans to strengthen its walls and bolster its defenses. As the bustling activity filled the courtyard, Amelia couldn't shake the sense of foreboding that weighed heavily on her heart. The enemy was powerful, their motives inscrutable, but she knew that this was humanity's last stand, and she was determined to do whatever it took to ensure their survival. With a deep breath, she steeled her resolve and joined the others, ready to face the challenges that lay ahead. The survivors worked tirelessly to transform the aging fortress into an impregnable citadel, drawing on their diverse talents and expertise to reinforce its walls and bolster its defenses. Amelia Donovan, the battle-hardened soldier, oversaw the training of the defenders, preparing them for the inevitable confrontation. Under her guidance, the group became a well-oiled machine, each member playing a crucial role in the fortress transformation. Liam Archer, the brilliant young engineer, led a team that designed and implemented a network of advanced early warning systems, sensor grids, and automated turrets to detect and repel any invaders. "We need to be ready for anything," Liam said, his brow furrowed in concentration as he pored over schematics. The enemy's tactics are unpredictable, so we have to be one step ahead of them. In the medical wing, Dr. Naomi Flores and her team worked tirelessly to ensure the survivors' well-being, stockpiling medical supplies and developing contingency plans to handle any potential injuries or illnesses. Her calm demeanor and unwavering compassion helped to alleviate the growing tensions among the group. "We're all in this together," Naomi said, her voice soothing as she tended to a wounded soldier. "We need to look out for one another if we're going to make it through this." Meanwhile, in the armory, a former military surgeon named Jack Reese oversaw the maintenance and distribution of the fortress' formidable arsenal. He drilled the defenders in weapons handling, combat tactics, and urban warfare, honing their skills to a razor's edge. "This is no time for amateur hour," Reese growled, his piercing gaze sweeping across the assembled group. "The enemy is coming, and they won't show us any mercy. We need to be ready to fight like our lives depend on it, because they do." As the days wore on, the survivors' dedication and determination began to pay off. The fortress defenses were being reinforced with layers of obstacles, traps, and defensive emplacements designed to break the will of any invaders. Amelia watched with a sense of grim satisfaction as the fortress transformed before her eyes, becoming a true bastion of humanity's last stand. Yet, even as the physical defenses took shape, Amelia couldn't help but notice the growing tensions within the group. Personal rivalries, conflicting agendas, and the sheer weight of their circumstances threatened to undermine the fragile unity that held them together. One night, as Amelia patrolled the fortress ramparts, she overheard a heated argument between Liam and a senior technician. They were debating the allocation of resources, each insisting that their respective projects deserved priority. Sighing, Amelia stepped in, her authoritative presence commanding the attention of the bickering pair. "This isn't the time for infighting," she said sternly. "We're in this together, and we need to put our differences aside for the good of the mission." Liam and the technician exchanged sheepish glances, the weight of Amelia's words sinking in. "You're right," Liam conceded. "We can't afford to let personal agendas get in the way. From now on, we'll work as a team, no exceptions." Amelia nodded, her gaze sweeping across the fortress defenses. "Good, because the enemy is out there, and they're not going to wait for us to sort out our differences. We need to be ready, no matter what." As the survivors continued their tireless work, Amelia couldn't shake the sense of unease that lingered in the back of her mind. The fortress was becoming more formidable with each passing day, but she knew that the true test was yet to come. The battle for humanity's survival was just beginning. The enemy's presence was detected at the outer perimeter of the fortress, and the defenders braced themselves for the inevitable attack. Amelia Donovan and the other seasoned veterans knew that this was the moment they had been preparing for, and they were determined to put their meticulous planning into action. As the alarm bells rang out, the survivors rushed to their assigned positions, each one playing a crucial role in the fortress defense. Liam Archer and his team of engineers activated the advanced sensor grid, carefully monitoring the movement of the approaching enemy forces. "They're coming in fast, Amelia," Liam reported, his eyes fixed on the screens before him. "Looks like a massive force, heavily armored and well-equipped. This is going to be one hell of a fight." Amelia nodded grimly, her hand resting on the hilt of her sidearm. "Then let's give them one they'll never forget. Have the turrets and defensive emplacements ready to fire on my mark." Around the fortress, the defenders took their positions, their faces set with grim determination. Jack Reese barked out orders, his gruff voice cutting through the tense silence. "All right, you sorry bastards, listen up. This is it. The enemy is at our doorstep, and they're not going to just walk away. So when I give the word, you unleash hell on them. Understood?" A chorus of affirmative shouts echoed through the fortress, and Amelia felt a surge of pride in her comrades. These were not just survivors. They were warriors, ready to defend their last bastion of hope with every fiber of their being. As the enemy drew closer, Amelia braced herself, her muscles coiled like springs. "Liam, on my mark," she called out, her voice clear and steady. "Locked and loaded, Amelia," Liam replied, his fingers poised over the firing controls. With a deep breath, Amelia raised her hand. "Mark." A barrage of gunfire, missiles, and heavy ordnance erupted from the fortress, striking the enemy's ranks with devastating precision. The invaders, caught off guard by the ferocity of the defenders' assault, faltered and began to retreat. Amelia watched with grim satisfaction as the enemy's forces crumbled under the relentless onslaught. But as the battle raged on, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this was only the beginning. "They're falling back, but they'll be back," she muttered, her eyes scanning the horizon. "We need to be ready for the next wave." Liam's fingers danced across the controls, redirecting the defensive systems to shore up weaker points in the fortress defenses. "We're going to need more ammunition and supplies if we're going to hold out," he said, his brow furrowed in concentration. Amelia nodded, her mind racing. "Reese, get a team ready for a supply run. We need to scavenge whatever we can from the surrounding area before the enemy returns." The grizzled sergeant nodded, his weathered face set in a grim expression. "You got it, Donovan. We'll bring back what we can, but we need to be careful out there. The enemy is no doubt watching our every move." As the survivors regrouped and began to assess the damage, Amelia couldn't help but feel a sense of cautious optimism. The fortress had withstood the first assault, and the defenders had proven their mettle. But she knew that the true test was yet to come, and they couldn't afford to let their guard down for a moment. With a renewed sense of purpose, Amelia turned her attention to the task at hand, determined to ensure that the last bastion of humanity would endure. As the siege on the fortress continued, the survivors faced the harsh realities of their predicament. Supplies were dwindling, tempers were flaring, and difficult decisions had to be made. Amelia Donovan watched with growing concern as the stockpiles of food, water, and ammunition began to dwindle. The scavenger run led by Sergeant Reese had been a partial success, but it had barely made a dent in their ever-increasing demand. "We're going to have to start rationing," Amelia said, her brow furrowed in worry as she reviewed the inventory reports. "At this rate, we won't have enough to last the week." Beside her, Liam Archer let out a frustrated sigh. "I was afraid of that. The defensive systems are draining our resources faster than we can replenish them. We need to find a way to conserve what we have." Amelia nodded, her mind racing with possible solutions. "Convene the others. We need to figure out a way to stretch our supplies and minimize our losses." As the group gathered in the fortress' makeshift command center, tension hung thick in the air. The strain of the siege was taking its toll, and tempers were running high. "We can't keep this up," one of the survivors, a former accountant named Olivia, argued. "We're burning through resources at an unsustainable rate. We need to consider cutting back on the defensive operations or even pulling back to a smaller, more defensible section of the fortress." Sergeant Reese bristled at the suggestion, his jaw clenching with barely contained anger. "You want to surrender?" he growled, his eyes narrowing. "That's not an option. Not while there's still a fight left in us." Amelia raised a hand, silencing the growing murmurs of dissent. "We're not going to surrender, but Olivia has a point. We need to find a way to conserve our resources without compromising our defenses." As the debate raged on, Naomi Flores, the compassionate medic, spoke up in a calm, soothing voice. "Perhaps we could implement a strict rationing system, allocating resources based on individual needs and responsibilities. That way we can ensure that everyone gets what they need to survive, without draining our supplies too quickly." The group fell silent, considering Naomi's proposal. Amelia could see the wisdom in her words, but she also knew that such a system would be fraught with challenges and potential conflicts. "It's a start," Amelia conceded, "but we'll need to work out the details carefully. We can't afford any mistakes or discord among us. The enemy is relentless, and they're not going to wait for us to get our act together." With a heavy heart, the survivors set to work, devising a rationing system that would ensure the equitable distribution of their dwindling resources. Tensions ran high as they grappled with the difficult decisions, but Amelia could see the determination in their eyes. As the days passed, the defenders found themselves facing a new challenge: the need to venture beyond the fortress walls to scavenge for additional supplies. Reese assembled a team of the most capable and experienced fighters, including Amelia, and they set out into the treacherous wasteland. The mission was fraught with danger, as the enemy's presence was ever present, and the scavenging grounds had been picked clean by other desperate survivors. But Amelia and her team pressed on, driven by the need to secure the resources necessary for the fortress' survival. When they finally returned, their haul was meager, but it was enough to provide a temporary respite from the looming specter of starvation and depletion. Amelia watched as the defenders rationed the supplies, their faces etched with a grim determination that belied the gravity of their situation. As the sun set over the fortress, Amelia stood on the ramparts, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The enemy was still out there, and the battle for humanity's survival was far from over. Tensions within the fortress reached a boiling point as the siege continued, the strain of dwindling resources and the ever-present threat of the enemy taking a heavy toll on the survivors. Amelia Donovan, ever the stalwart defender, found herself facing a shocking revelation that would shake the very foundations of their fragile unity. It began with a series of unsettling incidents, small but significant breaches in the fortress defenses, crucial intelligence leaks that allowed the enemy to anticipate their moves, and a growing sense of unease that permeated the group. Amelia, ever the consummate strategist, knew that something was amiss, and she was determined to uncover the truth. One night, as she made her rounds through the dimly lit corridors, Amelia caught a glimpse of a shadowy figure slipping out of the command center. Immediately, her instincts kicked in, and she gave chase, silently stalking the intruder through the winding passages of the fortress. The figure led her to a remote section of the compound, where a hidden communications array had been set up. Amelia's heart raced as she realized the implications. Someone within the fortress was betraying them, feeding information to the enemy. Steeling her nerves, Amelia stepped out from the shadows, her weapon drawn. "Hands up, where I can see them," she commanded, her voice steadied despite the turmoil churning within her. The figure froze, turning slowly to face her. Amelia's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the face. It was Olivia, the former accountant whose concerns over the dwindling resources had sparked such heated debate. "Amelia," Olivia stammered, her eyes wide with fear. I can explain." Amelia's grip tightened on her weapon, her jaw clenching with barely contained rage. "You'd better start talking, and it had better be good." Olivia's shoulders slumped, the weight of her actions seemingly crushing her. I didn't have a choice," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They threatened to kill my family if I didn't cooperate." Amelia's brow furrowed in confusion and disbelief. "Your family? But they're all gone. We all lost our loved ones in the chaos." Olivia's eyes glistened with tears. "Not all of them. My daughter, she's still out there, and they found her. They said they'd kill her if I didn't help them." The gravity of the situation hit Amelia like a physical blow. She had suspected treachery, but the thought that it was driven by such a desperate, maternal instinct was almost too much to bear. "You've been feeding them our plans, our defenses," Amelia breathed, her voice laced with a mixture of disbelief and disgust. "You've been putting us all at risk, all for the sake of your daughter." Olivia nodded, her shoulders shaking with the weight of her guilt. "I'm so sorry, Amelia. I never wanted any of this, but I couldn't let them hurt her. I couldn't." Amelia's mind raced, trying to reconcile the magnitude of Olivia's betrayal with the humanity that drove it. In the end, she knew what she had to do. The survival of the fortress, the last bastion of humanity, had to come first. With a heavy heart, Amelia raised her weapon, her finger poised on the trigger. "I'm sorry, Olivia, but I can't let you jeopardize everything we've worked for." As the report of the gunshot echoed through the fortress, Amelia felt a deep ache in her soul. She knew that this was only the beginning. The revelation of the betrayal would shake the group to its core, and the consequences of Olivia's actions would reverberate for a long time to come. With a sigh, Amelia turned and made her way back to the command center, steeling herself for the difficult conversations that lay ahead. With their numbers dwindling and their defenses weakening, the survivors of the last fortress prepared for the ultimate confrontation. Amelia Donovan, her resolve hardened by the betrayal of one of their own, knew that this would be the decisive moment that would determine the fate of humanity. The revelation of Olivia's treachery had shaken the group to its core, shattering the fragile trust that had held them together. Suspicion and mistrust spread like a cancer, and Amelia found herself working tirelessly to keep the defenders focused on the task at hand. "We can't afford to let this tear us apart," she said, her voice firm as she addressed the assembled group. "The enemy is closing in, and they won't show us any mercy. We need to put our differences aside and stand united, or we'll all fall." Liam Archer, his eyes haunted by the weight of Olivia's betrayal, nodded in agreement. "Amelia's right. We've come too far to let this break us now. We need to do whatever it takes to defend this fortress, for all our sakes." Around the command center, the survivors exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of their circumstances etched on their faces. But Amelia could see the determination burning in their eyes, the unwavering resolve that had brought them to this last stand. "Then let's get to work," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "We need to shore up our defenses, reallocate our resources, and prepare for the fight of our lives." In the days that followed, the defenders threw themselves into their tasks with a renewed sense of urgency. Liam and his team worked tirelessly to reinforce the fortress' weakened systems, while Sergeant Reese drilled the fighters in advanced combat tactics. Amelia, her own weapon always at the ready, moved between the various teams, offering guidance and support. She knew that the enemy was relentless, their numbers seemingly endless, and that their only hope lay in the unwavering determination of the defenders. As the day of the final confrontation approached, Amelia stood on the ramparts, her gaze fixed on the horizon. In the distance, she could see the enemy's forces amassing, a tide of destruction that threatened to engulf the last bastion of humanity. "This is it," she murmured, her fingers tightening around the grip of her rifle. "This is where we make our stand." Below, the defenders took their positions, their faces set with grim determination. Liam's voice crackled over the radio, his words laced with tension. "The enemy is closing in, Amelia. They're coming at us from all sides. We're going to need everything we've got to hold them off." Amelia took a deep breath, her mind racing as she formulated a plan of action. "Engage the defensive systems. Liam, Reese, have your team ready to move in as soon as the opportunity presents itself." The battle that followed was a blur of sound and fury, as the defenders unleashed a barrage of firepower against the invading forces. Amelia fought alongside her comrades, her skills honed by years of combat experience, her determination fueling her every move. But despite their best efforts, the enemy's numbers seemed inexhaustible, and the defenders began to falter, their resources dwindling with each passing minute. Amelia, her clothing torn and her face streaked with grime, turned to Liam, her eyes filled with a mix of desperation and resolve. "We need to do something, Liam. We can't hold them off much longer." Liam's brow furrowed as he considered their options, his mind racing. "There might be one thing we can try, but it's risky, extremely risky." Amelia's gaze hardened. "At this point, we don't have much choice. Whatever it is, we have to try." As the battle raged on, the defenders braced themselves for the final desperate gambit that would determine the fate of humanity's last stand. In the midst of the relentless assault on the fortress, Amelia Donovan and Liam Archer huddled together, their faces etched with a mix of desperation and resolve. The defenders were faltering, their resources depleted, and the enemy's forces showed no signs of slowing. "This is our last chance," Liam said, his voice tinged with a sense of grim urgency. "If we don't do something drastic, we're not going to make it." Amelia's gaze hardened as she listened to Liam's plan, her heart racing with a mix of fear and determination. "It's risky," she murmured, "but at this point, we don't have much choice." Liam nodded, his expression solemn. "I'll need a team of volunteers, the best of the best. This is our only shot at turning the tide." Amelia's eyes swept across the battered defenders, her gaze lingering on the faces of those she had come to respect and trust. "I'll lead the team," she said, her voice steady. "If we're going to do this, we'll do it together." As the plan was put into motion, a sense of cautious optimism began to take hold among the survivors. They knew the risks, the sacrifices that would be required, but they also knew that failure was no longer an option. Amelia gathered her team, her eyes meeting each of their gazes with a mixture of pride and resolve. "This is it, people. We're the last line of defense against the enemy, and we can't afford to fail. Are you with me?" A chorus of determined voices answered her, and Amelia felt a surge of pride in her comrades. These were not just survivors. They were warriors, willing to do whatever it took to ensure the survival of humanity. With a nod, Amelia led the team to the heart of the fortress, where the final desperate gambit would be executed. Liam, his fingers flying across the control panels, coordinated the complex maneuvers, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Remember, we only get one shot at this," he said, his voice tense. "If we time it wrong, we're all dead." Amelia and her team took their positions, their weapons at the ready. The sound of the battle raged around them, a deafening symphony of gunfire and explosions, but they remained focused, their resolve unwavering. "On my mark," Liam called out, his voice echoing through the command center. 3, 2, 1, mark. In a coordinated, lightning-fast sequence, the team executed their part of the plan, their movements precise and efficient. Amelia, her heart pounding in her chest, led the charge, her weapon blazing as she and her comrades fought their way through the enemy's ranks. The gambit was working, and for a moment, it seemed as if they might actually pull it off. But as they pressed forward, Amelia saw the enemy's forces converging on their position, their numbers overwhelming. "Liam, we need more time," she shouted into the radio, her voice strained with the effort of the battle. Liam's response was laced with a sense of dread. "I can't hold them off any longer, Amelia. You need to get out of there, now." Amelia's gaze swept across her team, her heart sinking as she realized the truth. There was no way out, no path to safety. They were trapped, and the enemy was closing in. With a deep breath, Amelia turned to her comrades, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "It's been an honor to fight by your side," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But this is where I make my stand." Before any of them could protest, Amelia broke away from the group, her weapon blazing as she charged headlong into the enemy's forces. The others, stunned by her sacrifice, watched in horror as she disappeared into the chaos of the battle. In the end, Amelia's sacrifice bought the survivors the time they needed to execute the final phase of the plan. As the enemy forces were pushed back, the last bastion of humanity's hope held firm, a testament to the unbreakable spirit of those who had given everything to defend it. In the wake of the grueling battle, the survivors of the last fortress grappled with the aftermath of their ordeal. The sacrifice of Amelia Donovan and the others who had given their lives to ensure the plan's success weighed heavily on their hearts, a somber reminder of the immense cost of their victory. Liam Archer, his eyes red-rimmed from exhaustion and grief, stood among the battered defenders, his hands trembling as he surveyed the damage. The fortress, once a bastion of hope, now bore the scars of the fierce confrontation, its walls scarred and its defenses weakened. "We did it," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "We managed to hold them off. But at what price?" Beside him, Sergeant Reese, his weathered face etched with a mix of pride and sorrow, placed a reassuring hand on Liam's shoulder. We're still here, son. That's what matters. Amelia and the others, they didn't give their lives in vain. Liam nodded, his gaze drifting to the makeshift memorial that had been erected in the fortress courtyard. The names of the fallen were etched into the weathered stone, a somber tribute to the sacrifices that had secured their survival. I just wish there had been another way, Liam said, his voice thick with emotion. They deserved to live, to see the world rebuilt. They didn't deserve to die like this. Reese sighed, his expression somber. None of us did, son. But that's the price we pay for survival. We carry on, in their honor, and make sure their sacrifice wasn't for nothing. Across the fortress, the other survivors grappled with their own grief and uncertainty. Naomi Flores, the compassionate medic, tended to the wounded, her eyes red from the tears she had shed. We lost so many, she murmured, her hands trembling as she changed a bandage. But we have to keep going. We owe it to them to rebuild, to give their deaths meaning. As the days passed, the survivors set to work, their determination fueling their every action. They repaired the fortress, reinforced its defenses, and cataloged their dwindling supplies, all the while mourning the loss of their comrades. Liam, his grief tempered by a newfound sense of purpose, led the effort to fortify the fortress, his innovative mind devising new systems and strategies to ensure their continued survival. We can't let their sacrifice be in vain, he said, his voice filled with a quiet resolve. We're going to make this place stronger, more impregnable than ever before. That's the best way we can honor their memory. In the quiet moments, the survivors gathered around the memorial, sharing stories and memories of the fallen. They spoke of Amelia's unwavering courage, Olivia's desperate love, and the countless acts of selflessness that had defined their final stand. As the days turned to weeks, the survivors began to rebuild, not just the fortress, but their lives. They cultivated the land within the fortress walls, tending to the gardens that would sustain them. They forged new alliances, their bonds strengthened by the shared trauma they had endured. And in the distance, a glimmer of hope began to emerge, a sign that perhaps, just perhaps, humanity had a chance to rise from the ashes and reclaim the world that had been lost. Liam, his gaze fixed on the horizon, couldn't help but feel a sense of cautious optimism. Amelia would be proud, he murmured, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. We may have lost this battle, but the war for humanity's survival is far from over. With that, he turned and rejoined his comrades, his steps lighter, his heart filled with a renewed determination to forge a future worthy of the sacrifices that had been made.